Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a lot to cover. I hope everybody had a great weekend, had a great Father's Day if you were celebrating, but we do have a lot to go over. Game 5s were forced in both the NBA and the NHL. We're going to go over how that happened, everything that went on with the games, and what we're looking for as Game 5 for the NBA is tonight. Game 5 for the NHL is tomorrow. So we'll go over a little bit of those. We'll also talk a little bit about finals MVP odds for the NBA. It's been kind of a weird series for that. There's no true overwhelming favorite right now. It's kind of up in the air of who's going to win finals MVP. So we'll talk a little bit about that in the second segment. In the third segment, that's where we'll cover the NHL. In the fourth and fifth segment, we're going to talk a little bit about baseball. If you are paying attention to baseball standings right now, in the NL especially, and a little bit in the AL, but especially in the NL, there are a lot of teams that are kind of grouped very tightly together. And that is culminating in what is looking to be a very, very interesting NL MVP race, not MVP, wildcard race, excuse me. So we will talk all about that in segment 4, as there are 7 teams within 1.5 games of that third wildcard spot. And then we'll close out our show talking a little bit about the Dodgers. They had a couple of unfortunate major injuries over the weekend, one to Mookie Betts, one to Yoshinobu Yamamoto. We will talk a little bit about how that affects the Dodgers in the future and everything else with the NL and the NL West specifically. But we're going to start off our show in the NBA today, talking a little bit about Game 4 of the NBA Finals. But before we get into that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. Appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday afternoon. Like I was saying, though, we are going to start off our show today, though, in the NBA. And we've talked a lot about this series so far. We've gone from, oh, this is going to be a tight series, to, oh, this is going to be a sweep, to where we're at now. Game 3, the Celtics are up 3-0. The Mavericks are having their best player, Luka Doncic, questions, which is something that I did not expect to happen heading into this series. That was not on my bingo card, at least. But we head into Game 4, backs against the wall. They don't want to get swept. The Celtics are a great team. They're down one of their more dominant players, at least in the finals, in Kristaps Porzingis, and all the momentum is on their side. And yet, in Game 4, the Mavericks win, and they don't just win. They win by 38 points. And to put this into perspective for all of you guys, 38 points is a blowout. 38 points in the NBA Finals is the third biggest win margin in the history of the NBA Finals. Only the Celtics beating the '08 Lakers and the '90s Bulls taking out the Pacers had a higher win margin. So 38 points is ridiculous. This is a huge, huge momentum shift in this series. And momentum is a huge thing in the game of basketball. It was something that the Mavericks were out of, especially after Luka fouls out in Game 3. They're able to come out and dominate this game straight up, every single part of it. Luka and Kyrie combined to score more points than the entirety of the Celtics for the whole first half. That is not a normal thing that is supposed to happen. Luka and Kyrie are great, and they have the ability to do that, but the Celtics, the way that they've been playing, the way that they've been dominating this series, and you can make the argument that this series should be closer than it is. 3-1, 3-0 comeback has never happened in the history of the NBA. 157 times this has happened. 157 times the team down 3-0 has lost. But the Mavericks have a little bit of hope left, and hope is a dangerous thing in sports. It's what, as if you were a team that's trying to close out, it's a dangerous thing, right? Because these teams, they play with everything they have. They got nothing to lose, right? They lose, they're done. These teams with the lead, they lose, they get another chance. The Celtics have 4 shots to win one game. The Mavericks, on the other hand, cannot lose for the rest of the season. Otherwise, it is done. This is a point where we get to see, are the Celtics able to clutch up? Are the Celtics able to make those moves? Are they able to lock in and be that great team that we know they are? They haven't really dealt with a fully healthy team with nothing to lose yet, right? When we look at what their playoff run has been, we talk about they were up three, they were up, they took care of business against the Heat, without Jimmy Butler. They took care of business against the Donovan Mitchell-less Cleveland Cavaliers. They took care of business against the Tyrese Halliburton-less Indiana Pacers. And now they go up against this team, this Luka Doncic-led team, and they seem to have figured something out. But then in Game 4, the Mavericks come out with a different level of energy and passion than they've played with this entire series. And this is the kind of energy that we know they have the ability to play with, right? We've seen the Mavericks play with this kind of energy, play with this kind of passion throughout the first couple rounds of the playoffs, getting them to this moment. Round 1, round 2, round 3, round 2 and 3 especially against the Thunder and the Timberwolves. We've seen the Mavericks play with this kind of defensive effort and energy, especially against those Timberwolves. They were heavily favored to lose those series, and in clutch time down the stretch, they were able to put pressure on Anthony Edwards, not let him get to his spots, play defense, play good perimeter defense, attack the way they wanted, and I think a lot of that has to do with, matchup is obviously a big part of it, and I think the Celtics aren't a great matchup for the Mavericks, but not having Kristaps Porzingis in there is huge for their game plan, right? You have a team that loves to attack the centers down low. But when they're able to stretch the floor, when they're able to cover all these positions, it's hard to run that pick and roll action and attack that center, that low guy that doesn't have that kind of athleticism as like a Rudy Gobert might have. But with Al Horford down there, and again, nothing against Al Horford, what he's been able to do this finals as a 38-year-old player. Again, 38 years old, Al Horford is playing some really good basketball. Now, it gets to the point where he can't play 30 minutes a game, but you shouldn't expect a 38-year-old Al Horford to play 30 minutes per game, right? That is kind of an unreasonable expectation for you to have if you are watching this series from a Celtics fan point of view, from really any point of view. You shouldn't expect Al Horford to play 30 minutes of great basketball at 38 years old, but he's giving you 25 minutes of really quality basketball, really good defensive basketball. He's able to switch onto guys like Luka, make that pick and roll a lot harder to deal with. He's been able to keep up with him. Luka tried a lot of those same dribble moves he tried on Rudy Gobert, and Al Horford has been able to stay with him, stay agile. It's been a huge, huge part of what's made the Celtics team look so dominant in these playoffs so far, especially against the Mavericks. But what we saw in Game 4, and what we saw really in what we saw in Game 4 and the back half of game, and right before Luka fouled out in Game 3, right, when the Mavericks were playing better basketball than them, they were playing with high intensity, with high energy, and this is what they need to do. The Celtics play fast, and I think the Mavericks are finally figuring that out, right? The Mavericks like to play a little bit slower. They like to play, their speed of basketball, but the Celtics aren't going to let them do that. And I know the Celtics made a lot of mistakes in Game 4. They didn't play their brand of basketball. They didn't play smart basketball, which is another factor in why they lost. This isn't all on the Mavericks. A lot of it is on the way that the Celtics played, and I want to see how the Celtics respond here in Game 5. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how and when, and how and if they do respond to the way that they played in Game 4 in Dallas. But going back home, playing against your home fans, we saw how much Kyrie struggled on the road, right? And Kyrie has been a huge part of these last two games for the Mavericks. Game three, even though they lost, he was the one keeping them in it. It wasn't a great Luka game. He was the one that was able to keep them in it. Despite Luka fouling out at the end, he still was able to keep them in it and keep it competitive. In game four, he and Luka both had great games, but really this Mavericks team kind of goes as he does. And I know that's a lot of pressure to put on Kyrie Irving, who is the number two option. But when you're playing like the Mavericks are, you expect Luka to go off, right? You expect Luka to score 30, 40 points maybe, have himself a nice game offensively and do whatever he does on the defensive end. But the rest of that, to keep pace with the Celtics, they need Kyrie Irving to drop 20 points minimum, right? They need 50 points combined out of their two stars, and Kyrie needs to score 20 for them to stay competitive. The role players need to step up. We saw a lot of them step up. Derek Lively hit his first career three. I know he's not a three-point guy. You're not going to rely on him to hit threes, but he played a great game in game four. Daniel Gafford didn't fill up the stat sheet quite as much as some of these other guys, but he played a great game. Really, the entirety of the reserve showed up for the Mavericks, and this is the way that we know the Mavericks can play basketball. This is how they got here. This is what they do. This is what they need to continue to do. And I want to see them keep that energy up, because that energy is what is going to make this a fun, competitive series. That is all I'm hoping for in Game 5 tonight. That being said, Game 5 back in the Garden. I'm going to give a little bit of a prediction here. Looking at the odds, obviously the way that the Celtics have been playing, one hiccup isn't going to be, the one hiccup isn't going to be the end of it, right? That's not going to be the end of their season. They're probably not going to end this. But I am a little concerned of how they're going to bounce back. The Celtics, for the one thing that they've struggled with all season long, has been closing games out. Right now, the game, Boston is heavily favored. They have a minus 265 in the sports book right now. That is a huge, huge favorite. And do I really disagree with that? No, I don't really disagree with that. I think that's about on point for what we should and might be able to expect for tonight's game in the Garden. Like I said, Kyrie hasn't been able to play great in Boston far, and unless he's able to be that Kyrie expect him to be the he was in Dallas, the Mavs stand no chance. I'm going to take the game just because, all the energy. They need to play basically a perfect game to beat the Celtics, and the Celtics need to have their own kind of mess ups to lose these games. I do think this is going to be a much closer game, one of those kind of down to the wire game 3 kind of endings, where, the Mavericks aren't going to have to claw back from a huge deficit, hopefully. I really do think that this Mavericks team is a team that, if they got going earlier in this series, could have made this a 7-game series. I really do believe that. But they got going way too late. Those first 2 games in Boston just sapped all the energy out of them, and they weren't able to respond quick enough in Dallas. And with Luka fouling out, that really killed them. I am taking Boston to win this game. I don't know if I'm going to take them with the points. It's 6.5 point spread, but I am taking Boston to win this game. I do think this will be a close game. But yeah, in our next segment coming up, we are going to finish up our NBA coverage for the day. We're going to talk a little bit more about the NBA Finals MVP, because it's been an interesting series, right? There's no clear Finals MVP frontrunner. So we're going to talk a little bit about who I think should win Finals MVP, some of the candidates as the betting lines have them, and why they are in consideration. So stick around for that. We will be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.